Welcome. It's Josh Tickell, and I'm speaking today with millennial expert Christine Hassler. Her book, Expectation Hangover, is a must-read if you haven't already got it. Really, what differentiates Christine and what we're going to be talking today is about the psychology of young people, the things that they're struggling with on a psychological level. What is it going to take to have a breakthrough for an entire generation? Christine, welcome. Great to see you.
It's great to see you again. I'm so excited about the book and the film and everything that you're working on.
Fantastic. Now, it's been a little while since we sat down and did your interview for the Revolution Generation, but some things remain the same and some things have changed over the course of 2 or 3 years. Mm-hmm. Give me an overview. What are the big issues that millennials are facing? And how do you think that's changing as they age up? I mean, we've got almost 50% of them are parents now. So when we say millennials, we're not talking about high school students really anymore.
Well, I think that the thing when we're talking, when I first started talking about millennials 12 years ago, we could kind of lump them into a category because we were really talking about the 20-something workforce. But now we're talking about a generation that spans an age from 20-ish to 38-ish. There's disagreements about where millennials start and begin, but that's generally where we are. And so it doesn't matter if we're talking about millennials or not. A person at 22 is going to be going through something much different than a person at 36, 37. So I think we're looking at we're separating the millennials into the mature millennials, meaning older, and then the recent college grads, more 20-something millennials. So what I think the more mature generation millennials are running into is a couple of things. Balancing parenting with work and with everything else they put on their plate, because they were the generation that were told you can be anything, you can do anything, you can have anything.
And you're special, right?
And you're special. And I think,
by the way,
the thing about like 30-something millennials is they're realizing that was really bad advice. And they learned in their 20s that sense of entitlement didn't serve them so well. And so I see this especially with millennials. And also we have to separate entrepreneurial millennials with millennials in corporate America, because then that breaks it down even more. So it's almost like we need a spreadsheet of all the different avatars of millennials. But what I'm seeing in just a working millennial, especially millennial women, because we're the first generation where the women went to work just as much as men did. And it was not only accepted, but it was expected. Millennial women put a ton of pressure on themselves to go and kill it in their career and have it all, have the kid, have the marriage, have it all. And so stress management and balancing everything, like 30-something millennials are incredibly stressed. They have a lot on their plate and they're trying to juggle it all. And those working in corporate America are also dealing with sort of how they work their way up, because they've got Generation X, the 40 to early 50-somethings, who really are the most annoyed generation by millennials. Like Gen Xers have the most trouble.
I think we're just the most annoyed generation in general. We're just annoyed about everything.
Yeah, it is a skeptical, cynical, like reality bites generation, So there's that. And so, they're being put into leadership positions because the baby boomer generation, who are millennials' parents, who actually are kind of the most accepting of millennials because they parented a lot of millennials, so they kind of get it. They're phasing out of the work industry a lot later, albeit, but so leadership jobs are starting to emerge because the Gen X generation is so small, but millennials are having a hard time finding mentorship with Gen Xers. So they're kind of thrown into these leadership positions in work and trying to and having to figure it out themselves, and often managing people that are older than them, because again, a lot of millennials are put into leadership positions at a much earlier age. We're seeing that again because Gen X is so small. So that's what we're seeing a lot with the millennials in the corporate world, is this kind of work-life balance thing. In addition to, I have all these new roles and responsibilities, but who do I go to, and how do I work? And the way we work as people is much different than the way our parents worked. And then kind of in the entrepreneurial world, again, I'm finding a lot of stressed out, burnt out 30-something millennials. So that's that group.
Yeah. So can I throw you a curveball? Can I ask you a question? Do you think this is part of the rise of why we're seeing medical marijuana in the United States explode is as a stress management tool. I mean, we've got a tremendous prescription, issue happening already with prescription drugs. Are we seeing an increase in sort of self-medication from this increased stress?
Yeah. Well, I think self-medication has been there since the beginning of time, right? It's just, are we shifting from alcohol and prescription drugs to more medical marijuana because we're more kind of health conscious, and a lot of people believe that that's, a healthier choice in terms of stress management through something external, right? Through a drug per se, or a plant, if we want to be really specific. So I don't know if there's research that's made the direct connection, but I think that speaks to the millennial generation, and especially, I love your title, Revolution Generation, of this is a generation that really wants to take stigma off things. So not only are we seeing medical marijuana being talked about, but we're seeing the stigma about mental health and about depression and about stress coming off. Like this sort of busyness as a badge of honor and this burning the candle at both ends that boomers and definitely Gen Xers bought into. Millennials are like, this isn't, I'm stressed out, I'm depressed, like I need help, and my mental health is important to me. And so they're speaking up about that. They're asking for stress management and things at work. So that's a really good, I don't think that's a curveball at all. I think that's an incredibly insightful thought of what's that connection.
And one thing I've noticed with our millennial employees is over the past couple of years, slowly at first, but now almost everyone has a dog and they want to bring their dog to work. This is a totally new workplace situation where we've got to have facilities now for people, facilities for canines. Is that part of the stress management situation here?
I think it's stress management, but I also think this whole division between work and life, the millennial, so Gen Xers invented the term work-life balance, right? And it was kind of that pie chart. All right, I want this many hours of work and this many hours at home. And Gen Xers were more private. So were boomers. But definitely, like, I have my professional life, I have my personal life, maybe I'll bring the kid to work day or whatever, but there wasn't a lot of transparency and there wasn't a lot of blending. But millennials, really, there isn't that definition between work and life. That's why they want freedom in terms of when they can work, when they can show up to the office. They want to dress how they want to dress. They want to bring their dog to work. They want to feel, here's the thing with the millennial generation, they definitely are the most connected digitally, but they also are the generation that's really craving connection in the human way. Well, dogs aren't human. Well, some people think their dogs are human, but you know what I mean?
A lot of people think their dogs are human.
Yeah, exactly. And millennials want the feels. They want all the feels, right? Yeah. So they don't just this kind of like professionalism, and they saw Xers and their parents have to go to work with a mask and have to put on this professional face, and there's no feeling to it. And so I think that's another big reason, you're saying bring the dogs to work and all that kind of thing, because we're craving connection. We're craving our work and our personal life to blend together. We want that kind. We want to feel good, and we want the things that make us feel good. Millennials, they get kind of a bad rap for wanting to feel good, but especially when I go speak to corporate America, I'm like, oftentimes you judge them and you complain about how they want to have fun at work. Is that so bad? Like, is it such a bad thing that we want to enjoy our job and we want to enjoy the people we work with and we want to have freedom and flexibility? Now, given we need a work ethic, but I think a lot of the things millennials have demanded that have been labeled as entitled or immature or narcissistic have brought a lot of rethinking to the workplace that has been a really good thing. I mean, there have been a lot of cubicles destroyed because of millennials, and I think that's a really good thing.
This all started with office space. You realize Gen X, we feel that we pioneered everything. The internet, destroying cubicles, etc. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're speaking with Christine Hassler. She is the author of Expectation Hangover, among other books. She's a keynote speaker. She's a millennial expert. Christine, your background is in psychology. Mm-hmm. One of the things that really got me interested in the generations was, as you know, I've done a lot of environmental work. I consider myself an environmentalist. And over the course of that work, what I saw was more and more young people getting involved, not less and less over time. And somebody said, well, these guys are millennials. And I said, wow, what's a millennial? Very interesting. People interested in the environment. That's how they were for me. As it's gone on, we see now that millennials are very interested in progressive trends. And a lot of this we're doing right now before the midterm elections, 2018, coming up to November. And I think a lot of people are hoping that millennials get more involved in the political process. But you said something to me before we did our interview. You said, what we're seeing now is a shift even between millennials and Gen Z. These new Gen Zers, I mean, they're taking on some big issues. Gun control, I think gun control is at the forefront of everybody's mind, wherever you stand on the issue. Tell me a little bit more about the breakdown between these generations. Psychologically, what are the drivers that are causing them to be involved in activism, involved in change? And how's that going to change when we get to this next generation, which, you know, we thought a lot of these issues would be solved by now, but they're taking on even bigger issues, some of them.
Well, there's two ways to look at it. There's a generational conversation, and then there's sort of just a rite of passage evolution conversation. So if you look back to every generation when they were in their 20s had some kind of activism, had some kind of pissed off with something, and I'm going to do something about it, right? It's a very, I don't want to say rebellious, because that's not what it is, but it's a questioning. You know, our brain doesn't fully form until we're 25. So in our 20s, we're still very both emotionally and logically based. And so a lot of times in our early 20s, we get highly reactive and things really get us on the emotional level. But yet, and we're mature enough adults, we think, you know, wow, we have power, we can do something about it. So a lot of this kind of like, I'm going to change things is a natural part of that part of our development. Now, what's disappointing to me is that as we age and we get into our 30s and 40s and we have more responsibility and children and things like that, it's almost like we shut down that kind of emotional, passionate center, because if we keep that open, we also have to deal with our past wounds. We also have to deal with our stuff. You know what I mean? And so as we mature, it's like we numb and we shut that down and we don't want to feel anything. And what's sad about that is we lose our passion. We lose our activism. We lose that desire to fight. So what I hope, and I'm going to answer your question, but what I hope is that what's cool about millennials and as young people is they're, and I see this because I'm a life coach and I work a spiritual psychologist as well. And so I work with a lot of people on their inner world, is that millennials are starting to see the value of doing their own personal development work. They're starting to see the value of not shutting down their emotions, not shutting down, not numbing themselves, basically. And so I think this is a generation that into 30s, 40s, and beyond, where not only are we passionate about making change, but we have the experience, we have the money, we have the connection to make it happen. If we keep that part of ourselves open and available, we have the passion and kind of the anger that we need to really go after a cause, because we need to be pissed off about something to actually make a change about it. But we also have the maturity and the resources to do it. So I'm excited about that. And what I'm seeing in terms of the distinctions between generations is, this is not only what I'm seeing, this is what my peers are seeing, is generations kind of like skip a generation, just sort of like, you know, red hair can skip a generation, or twins or whatever genetically. If you look at baby boomers and millennials, right, Gen X is in the middle, there's a lot of similarities. A lot of similarities in terms of formative events, in terms of their priorities and preferences, in terms of the things they're passionate about, their desires, their values. So when we look at Gen Z, what's the generation that's like their grandparent generation? Gen X.
Oh no, it's us.
Oh no.
They're going to be cynical. Does that mean they're going to listen to Depeche Mode? Is Depeche Mode really going to come back in?
Depeche Mode never went away, in my opinion.
Whoa. Okay, yeah.
I actually saw the concert about a year, him in concert a year ago. And
yeah, no, they're making a comeback. I know. Exactly. So is that really? Can we expect another sort of reality is harsh, bit of cynicism type generation?
No, because what happens is that the parent generation always kind of bleeds in a little bit. So what's great about Gen Z, and this is what's great about the internet, is they can look to millennials and they can look to their parents, which are mainly the Xers, and go, and this is what millennials did too. And they can go, okay, what's working with that generation and what's not? Like, what do I like about what my parents did and what do I not like? What do I like about what the millennial generation did and what do I don't like? So the thing about Gen Z is they're a little more, and again, super young generation. We don't have a lot of research yet, but they're a little more practical. They're definitely more concerned about money. So as millennials would take a job that maybe didn't have as high a pay or didn't have the security, but had a really cool work environment, had a social cause. Those things are important to the Gen Zers, but so is money, because they saw the economic crisis. They saw, like, Gen Z, millennials really didn't see their parents struggle with money. Of course, I'm talking generalizations here. Obviously, some millennials did. But for the most part, millennials grew up in a time when the economy was doing well. Gen Z, on the other hand, and younger millennials really saw their parents struggle. When you don't, are you still there?
I am still here. I don't know what happened there. Am I still here?
Okay, good. When you don't see a lot of trouble with money, then it isn't as big of a concern. But when you don't see your parents happy, then you want the happiness, right? So we got to look at what the generation is seeing. So if Gen Z is seeing more trouble with the economy, struggle with money, then that's going to become a higher value to them. Does that make sense?
Interesting. Okay, so, partially it's history, patterns of history repeating themselves, which is something we talk about in the Revolution Generation book and the movie, which you're so articulate in the film. I can't wait for you to see it. It's exciting. We were just looking at you, in fact, on screen just a minute ago. And, we talk about that history repeating itself. But I think what's important about what you're saying is it's partially there's patterns, but partially they're being influenced by the events that are happening, and they are influencing events that are happening.
Absolutely.
So it's a constellation of, pattern, influenced by, and influencing.
Right.
And it makes me wonder, I think a lot of people are curious. We've got the largest independent, registered independent generation in history. Over 50% are neither Democrat nor Republican, registered as independent. And so now here comes Gen Z, and the first ones of Gen Z are almost old enough to vote. What's going to happen? I mean, we've got two big pivotal elections coming up. They're going to change the course of history, probably, going to decide a lot of environmental issues, things that are important to people like me. Mm-hmm. Do you have any thoughts on the activism, the nexus of activism and policy that we're going to see in the next couple of years?
Oh, gosh.
I know you don't have a crystal ball, but just any thoughts in general,
I wish I had it. Well, sometimes I do wish I had a crystal ball. Sometimes I don't. Well, here's, based on research and based on talking to a lot of young people, the biggest thing that I hear from them is they don't believe the system works. They're like, why bother voting? None of it works. So and this is why I think we saw young people really understand cryptocurrency and get into that. They were more likely to buy into it than Gen Xers and Boomers for sure, is because they see current systems not working. So what I think Gen Z is going to do, what millennials are starting to do, is go, this isn't working. The policies and things aren't working. What's our workaround? And what I really kind of hope this generation does is break through a lot of the systems and innovate, because we really need to innovate, a lot of our systems and our structures. And I think younger people are starting to really get, I either try to fight this archaic system where even if I get the person I wanted elected, how much power do they actually even have to get something done? Right. Versus how do I go around it and innovate something better? It's sort of like the Tesla mindset, rather than trying to take all cars off the road, I'm going to invent something better that's super desirable, that's going to open people's minds and start getting people to convert. So that's the thinking, that kind of innovative thinking that I'm really excited about, that I'm definitely seeing in the millennial and that I'm starting to see in the Gen Z generation as well.
So a lot of disruption, a lot of disruptive thinking, not just in technology, but in the systems of society. How do we actually live? Let's disrupt that stuff as well.
Right. Exactly. It's more and more young people aren't getting a traditional lease. They're digital nomads. They want to live in I don't want to say communes, that's sort of the wrong word, but that kind of environment, like shared space. They don't want their own furniture. They don't want a car. They believe in the shared ecosystem. They're aware of their carbon footprint. All of these things of the way we're supposed to do things, younger people are like, why? That doesn't make any sense. They're really, and that's, again, like younger millennials and Gen Z, that's what I'm seeing too. They're like, they're questioning things, not just from a rebellious way, but really from, that makes zero sense. Why am I going to have a car if I only drive it here or there? Why do I need to be at work 9 to 6 if I can work at 11 p.m. and get the job done if that's when I'm more productive? So that kind of question, I think, leads to the disruption that you're talking about.
Great. 2 more questions, Christine. First one is, what can we do to support younger generations, specifically to support them becoming leaders and taking positions of leadership?
Yeah.
Okay. What can they do? Second question, and I want to put them both because they're kind of 2 sides of the same coin. What can they do to help embrace older generations? Because I think there's a lot of subtle or even overt generational friction. Like, those Gen Xers and Boomers, God, they're just so old, Some
think that, but some don't. I think it depends on how we show up, right? Okay, so first to them. So this may be kind of surprising, given everything I've said about millennials and Gen Z. Given there's such a growth mindset, innovative, kind of want to change the world, often stereotyped as entitled generation, they also, again, we're talking generalization, so this doesn't apply to everyone, but what I'm seeing as a huge pattern, especially being on the kind of the psychological side, is massive insecurity and self-doubt. And actually low self-worth. Now you'd think, wait, if my parents inflated my ego my whole life, yes, but that kind of inflated sense of ego, when you get out into the real world and that's not happening to you, you start to question everything. And millennials, especially millennial women, are incredibly self-critical and incredibly hard on themselves. Because if I'm growing up hearing I can do and be and have everything, and I see on social media that everybody can have and do everything, and I don't, I am playing the massive comparison game, and I'm feeling very insecure, and I'm beating myself up. So, externally, millennials may look one way. Internally, a lot of them, again, we're dealing with higher levels of depression, massive self-doubt, and insecurity. And also feeling like they have to show up. A 25-year-old often has the expectation that they have to show up acting like a 40-year-old, like that they need to know everything. So sometimes they get the reputation of, they don't do anything because they're afraid to ask questions because they don't want to look stupid. So that gets me to my answer. How do we really help them become leaders? You actually help them with a healthy ego. Like, acknowledge them. When giving criticism, turn it into a learning experience. Be a coach, not a cheerleader, not a, oh my God, you're so amazing, like a lot of their parents were, and not a harsh critic like they have going on inside their head, but really coach them, help them learn their value, help them learn their self-worth, help them learn that they're enough, help them learn that failure is okay, that it's really okay, and help turn that into a learning experience. So really empower them, because millennials have the skills, they really have the skills, and I think where they need the support and the help and the encouragement is on the self-worth and on the confidence. Because again, what I was saying before, how we keep that passion and that desire to disrupt alive is we don't numb, right? And so help them not to numb, help them to really discover themselves too. If you have millennials on your staff, get them into personal development so they can start to really understand their own psychology. So that would be my first part. And then how can millennials, I think that, to repeat your question, how can millennials really embrace the older generation? So curiosity, I think, is one of the most underrated qualities. Like we talk about, confidence and fulfillment and creativity and humor and all these things. But curiosity is, I think, one of the greatest ways we make connections. And so be curious. Be super curious about older generations, about what you could learn from them, about their way of the world, about their stories. If you can come in with that kind of curiosity, and this doesn't just apply to older generations, this applies to anyone in the world. then you're automatically going to create an openness. You're automatically going to create rapport with them. And know that like learning can go both ways, right? I know I have things to learn from 22-year-olds. And so I always go into the mindset of how can I teach and empower and share? I'm curious about that. And then I want them to be curious about me, not just in terms of me giving advice, but curious about life. So that's how I'd say be curious so that you can form connections.
Christine, as usual, articulate, amazing. I always learn something when I speak to you, always about, life, but really this generational thing is so fascinating. And I think we're just sort of starting to see this tidal wave of change play out as more and more young people enter the workforce. Christine Hassler, author of Expectation Hangover. How could people find you on social media? How could people connect with you, Christine?
Thank you. Christine Hassler, CHRISTINE, HASSLER. I'm really active on Instagram, Facebook. I also host a podcast where I coach people live on the air. It's called Over It and On With It. We go really deep. A lot of millennials call in, so that's another place to find me and connect with me as well. And if you just go to my website, you get my free coaching assessment. So you get to go through a coaching exercise that I do with all my clients. Free
coaching assessment. I'm ready to take that right now.
I see so many red flags.
Christine, thanks so much. I am so excited that you're in the new film, The Revolution Generation, as well as the book. You give some incredible insights in that. And sounds like you may be able to come to one of our premieres. I'm not sure the first premiere, but we'll get you out. We'll get you on the red carpet soon.
That would be so fun. Yes. And I'm so honored and proud to be a part of it. And thank you for this work. I think it's definitely a very misunderstood generation. So I'm really proud to be a part of this work because I think you're bringing a lot of clarity to a really important topic. So thank you.
Awesome, Christine. Great speaking with you today. Thanks everybody for listening. Make sure to share this on Facebook and Instagram. Sharing is caring after all. There you go. Have a great day. Thanks everyone. Thanks, Christine. Bye for now.